Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining another Expert Partner webinar. Here at PASA, we're very grateful for the support of LexisNexis Risk Solutions. They chair our working group on identity, and they're also hosting today's webinar for us, so thank you. We're joined today by the Head of Identity Strategy, Lorraine Salmon, and we're also joined by another friend of PASA today. We're grateful that Adam Byford from Beyond Encryption is here as well, so he can share his expertise in email security. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
If I just set the scene a little bit for us all. So at the heart of every scheme is the trust that members place in you to safeguard information, identity, and their benefit. The trust is built on data integrity, and whilst I suspect we'll talk about trust quite a lot today, we'll be talking a lot more than just the underlying data. We'll be talking about all sorts of layers on top of that as well. Of course, when records are incomplete or inaccurate, risk does escalate quickly. We know that. And for these same reasons, I'm sure some schemes, and maybe even some people on this call today, probably shy away from using email as a channel, despite how convenient it is. Some of you who do use email might be limiting yourselves to telling members where they can find information or documents online, or pointing them to an answer you've already given and updated in a website. Problem is that sort of just adds another hurdle to getting the answer if you're the member, another password to remember. So when thinking about that T word, trust isn't built overnight, nor is it built or protected by any one individual tool. Everything happens in layers, starting with dealing with the members where they want to be dealt with, a theme we're picking up from dashboards and why there's a sense of why private sector dashboards are needed as well as just a central government one. They want their pensions where they want to find them. But your trust builds with you being swift and responsive to when members want information. If you can't build your own tone of voice, your own brand, your own reliability and reputation with your members, you do risk those members going elsewhere for that information and believing that instead. But do you want your brand to be known for being right? Eventually. So that's what we're addressing today. Unfortunately, a digital by default world, slow but sure doesn't win this race. I'm delighted to be joined by two terrific experts in this field to discuss this challenge further. How do we ensure our inboxes, and to be fair, the inboxes of our members as well, are not under threat? So by way of introduction, I'll ask a couple of questions so we can get going. So Adam, I'll start with you. So as you introduce yourself, maybe you could comment on the fact that I touched upon maybe there's industry reticence to use email as a channel. And how common is it that some digital shift only really reached websites and not email when it comes to secure information? And why should schemes be making more of emails? So, morning, Adam.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I think the status of online services developed over quite some time, and unfortunately for me, I'm very old, and I can remember the pre-digital revolution, and you know, and I also have to hold my hands up a little bit to be partially blamed for the status that we created within financial services around the proliferation of portals and how engagement with them has maybe struggled, and why we now work in secure email to help improve that engagement layer. So portals, as you mentioned, Chris, are quite often the default digital channel used by firms, and they are very, very widely used, and almost part of their success is their failure. As a consumer in the UK, you will have on average access to 119 portals. You probably on average as well have about 80 apps on your phone. So when people send that message, you know, again, Chris, you referenced earlier where they're pointing the customer to go to a portal and pick it up, customers end up pretty much fulfilling the role of the postman. So having to go around to nearly 200 different places to pick up correspondence from the people that they deal with, which is highly unsatisfactory as a customer experience, and we will have done this or not, as the case may be. And what we see, particularly in FS, is there's a fairly high reticence to people actually undertaking those tasks, especially when they don't know what is being put onto that portal or what the message is saying that they're sitting there. So if you do that, again, averages across FS are particularly low, less than 10% ordinarily, between 4 and 8% read rate you get on those messages. So you're not getting the level of engagement with your customers that you would ideally want. By contrast, our secure email system, we've designed it to be super simple and to remove a lot of stages in the way. We have an average of a 78.4% read rate. Now, most of our work, whilst the product is email, can be used by anyone, most of what we do is based around financial services. And therefore, talking about the subjects that you talk to your customers about, and some might say not the most highly engaging or interesting stuff, but that 78.4% is based on that subject matter. So it's a significant increase in engagement, and that's what everyone is struggling with, I think, when they look at how they engage with their customers, and trying to get messages out, trying to fulfill their role, and avoid leaving a void, which will be filled by others. And I think that's really important. So I guess added on to that, the FCA earlier this year redefined what is durable medium to say it's digital by default, which has increased the amount of activity, certainly for us as a business, but also it's engaged people in really reviewing, not just having a digital communication platform, but also looking at how well it actually works for them, and does it deliver in line with their expectations and needs. Thanks. So quite a shift.
Absolutely. And morning to you, Lorraine, as well. As an expert in this field of digital identity, branching out into email sounds risky, even though you've got the FCA telling you that that should be your default. We've got members telling us that they want to deal with email. If any of our audience today have not yet adopted email as a trusted channel, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And good morning, everyone. As Chris introduced me, I'm Lorraine Salmon. I'm Head of Identity Strategy at LexisNexis for our UK and Ireland, LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And as Chris said, I also chair the PASA's Identity Management Working Group. So thanks, everyone, for joining today. In answer to your question, I think really there's an opportunity here not to avoid email, but really to make digital communications trusted enough so that schemes can use them with more confidence and use the right digital channel as appropriate for the customer need, the member need. So that means being really clear as it comes to email, about being really clear about who the message is going to, securing delivery of that message or a communication where appropriate, and adding in stronger identity and fraud controls, especially when the risk is higher. So today, many schemes are relying heavily on post, but post itself carries risk, especially when data is out of date. So for me, really, the question is not, is it digital or is it paper? It's how do you make member communications more trusted, more measurable, and really safer by design.
Thanks. Let's get into the meat of this then. We got some questions that our audience sent in advance, so thank you for that. Please use the tools available to you on the webinar today, and send us some more questions, and we'll pick them up as we go along. So I'm going to start with some that we've had already. So from all your respective perspectives, that sounds good, doesn't it? Respective perspectives, why is securing email communication such a critical issue for pension schemes right now?
I mean, I can jump in on this
yeah.
one. I mean, as you mentioned in the intro, Chris, there, if you want to communicate anything with substance or anything to do with a person, so any personally identifiable data or information that you want to incorporate within an email, then it needs to be secured. There are guidelines laid out by the ICO through GDPR and the FCA, and many bodies will tell you that if you are going to pass sensitive information or personalized information via email was never designed to be secure. It was designed as an open communication pathway. So if you're going to do it, you need to make sure that you add a security layer or layers to your communications. And I guess traditionally, whenever you introduce security to anything, you impact the usability of it. So there's a massive trade-off here in making sure you get the balance right of usability and security. You know, we all walk around generally with a lump of metal in our pockets that we use to open the front doors to our house. Now, that's an inconvenience that we're willing to put up with because it's a fair trade-off rather than leaving our house open to anyone who might want to walk through the door. And so doing a similar act with email, there needs to be a fair value exchange, which is where we think we focus a lot of our attention to make sure that we apply the right level of security so that only the intended person can read a message, and that it's not open to anyone to look in and peer in on any bad actors or whatever. But also it's got to be usable, it's got to be simple, and it's got to be quick and easy. And that's the whole point of moving things digitally, is to try and improve efficiency and effectiveness, and therefore getting that balance right is an important element.
Yeah, and just to add to that in terms of kind of why securing emails is kind of email communications is so critical for pension schemes right now. I think it matters more because of the point earlier around schemes are trying to modernize member communications, but at the same time, fraud is becoming more targeted and even more convincing. So email can be really fast, very familiar and measurable, but this is only really if schemes have got confidence that the messages are reaching the right person and in the right way. And as I said earlier, the alternative isn't safer. So because the post carries its own risk as well. So if addresses are out of date, or if documents are misdirected and go into the wrong place. So really it's about making digital communications really trusted enough that schemes are able to use email with confidence.
I think moving on then, so the new risks that a digital first approach might bring, again, to you, Lorraine, how does that mean that schemes need to rethink how they sort of look after the bedrock? We've touched upon secure delivery of the email, that, you know, that's Adam's wheelhouse, but actually rethinking how you manage identity, how you manage the data quality that supports that identity.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, the digital first shift, what that does increases both speed and scale. So weak identity checking, poor contact data, or unsecured delivery just create bigger risks much more quickly. So schemes really need to, you know, if you don't rethink those foundations, they're going to make it's going to make it easier for fraudsters to exploit stale data and to impersonate members or hide kind of risky changes inside routine communications. So I think we need to stop thinking about only about the channel and start thinking about the trust in the contact point. So the confidence in the individual and whether the communication's protected in the right way. So I think kind of going on in terms of emails, kind of a really heavily targeted channel for fraudsters right now. It's high volume, it's low cost. Attackers can kind of spoof and scale in seconds. So so there's a number of different attack vectors that are apparent. So credential phishing, password reset abuse, account takeover, misdirected confirmations, with the stale data. And then there's more sophisticated impersonation around bank detail changes and transfer requests. And I think for pensions, that risk is really amplified because we know that members have got multiple pots, and as we know, they might not always be close to the detail on who holds what and where they are. So that again makes a convincing message harder to spot as being fraudulent. But I don't think that means schemes should avoid email. It means that they can stop treating standard email as kind of the only model, and instead focus on whether the message is going to the right person, whether it's being delivered securely, and whether the action that's intended to follow it is protected in the right way and they've got the right fraud controls and identity checks involved in.
Just picking up on that before I turn to our first audience member question today. Thank you for that, Duncan. We'll be on that in a minute, but we're talking about the data. So from your knowledge and experience, Lorraine, on average, how accurate is the member data we need to rely on for security?
Yes, I mean, I think in practice, member data can look like it's complete on paper, but in the real world, it can be very wrong, because what happens is people move, they retire, they sadly die, or they change their contact details. And the problem is that schemes don't always hear about that immediately, if at all. And we all know the problem with lost pots, etc., the lost pot problem. But I think it's really important when looking at the data not to assume that email and the email address is the weakest data point in the mix of all the data attributes. So many people keep the same email address for years, often longer than they stay at one postal address. So personally, I've lived at 4 addresses, but I've always had the same email address. That probably says something about my age, Adam. So I'll join you on that one. But email can actually be a very valuable long-term contact point if the schemes have got enough confidence that it is still valid and belongs to that person, isn't showing any signs of compromise or misuse. And that all comes part and parcel of knowing that your data is accurate and up to date.
And now to pick up on Duncan's question, it's back to something you just said, Adam, with your analogy with the lumps of metal in your pocket. I was wondering where we were going with knuckle dusters for a minute, but so efficiency and effectiveness is exceptionally important, but doesn't necessarily guarantee best member experience. So how do you consider member experience when assessing that trade-off of making emails very secure?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's not a single answer to it. I mean, it will be down to where lines want to be drawn, where risk appetite is. I guess what I would going back to my first point, looking at how people engage with you, is getting that primacy for the period of time that you're important to a customer. That's getting that balance and getting that crossing of paths at the right time is what you really need. And therefore having that balance right is where what your customers will let you know partly that you're doing the right thing by engaging with you. Obviously, when you have the digital comms versus analog, everything is auditable, so you can see exactly who is engaging, who is not. You can tell if people are, if you send stuff via email, you can see if they've downloaded attachments even, so you can understand the level of engagement you're achieving, which will help you to understand if you are hitting the mark from that customer's perspective. But I would say there's never going to be a one size fits all. And that's a statement that's come out from the FCA more recently, which is so be where your customers want you to be, as opposed to trying to shoehorn them into a particular solution. So I would say whilst my solution gets some great engagement, it's not going to be the silver bullet for every single one of your members. So understanding what does work and what their preferences are. There was a recent Standard Life survey which covered this off very well, that looked at how members wanted to be engaged on what channel, and there was a mixture there. Email did come out as probably the most favourite, but it did show that there's very much a horses for courses element here.
Thank you. Got another comment and question from Robert, so thank you for that. Commenting on, it's a shame we're still dealing with poor data when everyone's so close to connecting to dashboards. But from that, and it's maybe who Robert works for, should be borne in mind here, but do you feel schemes are engaging enough with tracing firms to maintain addresses, mortality screening, and obtaining email addresses? Go take that one, Lorraine.
Yeah, sure. I think there's lots of practical methods to ensure and validate that email addresses and data is up to date. This is obviously, in terms of using that on an ongoing basis. So practical signs. So are you getting bounce backs, repeated delivery failures, duplicate use across multiple kind of account member records, any unusual patterns as well. So those kinds of things don't help you prove the ownership of the email, but they're useful for taking a look at your data and knowing whether it can be relied upon. But I think obviously where customer data cleansing capabilities can help. They can help standardize and cleanse contact data, which is critical for the starting base of knowing who you're talking to is the right person. So doing that, you can identify any areas and remove duplicates, highlight kind of shared email usage, append data as well where it's missing. And I think that, that doesn't remove the need for continual member re-verification, especially at when a higher risk action is happening. But it's something that schemes should prioritize in terms of where to focus their effort in making sure the data is up to date. And so kind of not silently overwriting historical email address data, but use cleansing tools and validation to improve the confidence and get rid of the bad data that's in there.
Maybe we move on from data a little bit, because otherwise Christy will tell me off for stepping on her working group. So let's think back to security and the email here. So we've said we've used the word layers a few times on this call. The questions you've already both answered. You've also mentioned a few times that there isn't one thing. It's a build up of things. So we sort of got at why that signal control isn't enough. So what do we think we mean by a layered approach to identity and fraud, Lorraine? What does that look like in a pensions context?
Yes, I mean, I think in terms of in that there are multiple layers that all need to be kind of orchestrated and working together to be sure that you have assurance over that a person is who they say they are. You can't really rely on one single point, or it's risky to rely on one single point. So it does start with making sure that your data is up to date. But when it comes to identifying and making sure that you are the person is who they say they are, you need to be checking multiple points. So email address, checking against their PII data, then also checking that the person claiming to be that identity, which you verified is a real identity, is the person that's actually entitled to that identity. So that's kind of what we call authentication. So that's making sure the person doing the action is that right person or not an imposter. So that's when other checking layers come into it. And so checking ID documentation with biometrics, so to make sure at the moment in time it's the right person that's trying to do the action. And I guess the trick is joining all of that together. So it's data, documents, and then kind of overlaying that with kind of digital affirmation. So knowing whether that email address has potentially been involved in a fraudulent activity, knowing whether the device that the customer is using is in the right location in the world and you know has the normal patterns of behavior that are associated with that device. So all of that together needs to be working together. So it's a bit of a kaleidoscope of attributes that you need to be checking at the same time, kind of getting that in the right order. So yeah, that's what I mean by the layers.
And moving on to the actual email delivery itself, then, and Adam, we talk about secure delivery. Ties in nicely with a question that we've just had from Samantha Watson. So thank you, Samantha. So securing the email, how can schemes securely meet the members on their preferred channel? We've said Standard Life evidence shows that it's the one they prefer the most. But how do we meet them there securely? What are the tools and techniques we've got?
Yeah, so I guess again, there's layers to this as well. So in order to make sure that the information that within the email itself is kept safe, then we apply a very high grade, military grade encryption to it. So if anyone were to try and read the content, it is unreadable. And that includes us as well. We can't read those emails. We don't hold all the keys necessary to unopen it. But so that's the first stage. So that email is untouchable unless the recipient can meet a challenge to authenticate themselves. And those challenges that we support via the system. So we have a full, a 2FA option where we send an SMS code to a mobile phone, and it needs the user to then input that code into our email form before they can read it. We support question and answers as well. So if you have a security framework that you're comfortable with when people call you up, for example, how do you take them through a process before you start to disclose information about the scheme or their benefits? You can follow the same pathway via email too. So you can ask them some specific questions that you know the answer to, a shared secret. And you can also make sure that they've got control of a mailbox by sending also a code in an email. So on its own, it doesn't prove you're talking to the right person, but it does prove that someone has got control of that mailbox. So if it's used in addition to the others, it can elevate the level of security even higher. And then we are also working with the guys at Nexus to add full ID&V capabilities into the service as well. So if it's something really sensitive, you can make someone undertake an ID&V check before they can read an email.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of the tools and things that members would actually already be used to elsewhere. It's not like you're inventing something new for this. There should be some recognition there. I'm just touching upon, just for a brief levity, I don't think the pensions industry has a problem with sending unreadable comms. So it's not just encryption for that. Sorry, moving on. So you've touched a few things, and you both touched a few things about not just an email as a be all and end all, but actually that there are benefits to a digital first approach. But what would you say is the main benefit of going through this journey to shift to email as a channel?
I mean, Lorraine's picked up on a very important one, which is the longevity of an email address. There was some stats we had previously which showed that people were keeping email addresses on average for 10 years. That was on the basis of the likes of Gmail and Hotmail and all that being around for 20 odd years, which kind of led you to think that if the average was 10, then people were keeping them. Some stats that came out earlier this year showed that the average consumer has 1.7 personal email addresses. So I know some people use one to send junk to, but one of those email addresses they're likely to keep for life. So there's a massive benefit in using it as that thread to keep in contact with a scheme member throughout their life. As Lorraine said, irrespective of their physical address changing, that's an important one. And also, even if they move overseas, your email address doesn't need to change just because you move overseas. So again, it's a constant there. So there's clearly that element of keeping in touch with people. You've got then also the ESG element, where the amount of carbon needed to communicate with people digitally versus print, pack and post is significantly less, probably more than or less than 10% of the equivalent. And there's a bit around cadence as well, because it's instant. The postal service is doing a good job at sort of eating itself with less and less delivery options, increased costs, so cost is another factor. But being able to send a message to a customer and then get it straight away, again, has real benefit to it.
Anything to add, Lorraine?
No, I completely agree with all of those points around the obviously the kind of the enduring email address being a really important data point, and can often be a very trusted one as well. So it's kind of it's not kind of you don't need to be going into this at the fact that email can be used only for low risk use cases. It can be structured and organized that it can deal with lots of digital comms as well.
You mentioned in there one of the benefits being measurability. So we all know, and we've touched upon already, about how do you know you've engaged well. If we're posting stuff out, even if it's not transactional, we just annual benefit statement, we post them out and no one knows if they've read them. We put them on a website. You maybe have some traffic there to measure to see if anybody logged in to look at the benefit statement. Is the benefit of the way in which you set up the infrastructure for your secure email that it's also something else you can measure and monitor and change your strategy as you go, Adam?
100%. I mean, yeah, getting that granularity of engagement is awesome, and we don't suggest that people use this mechanism for anything other than sending personalized data. So whilst we achieve an open rate which is incredibly high, part of the reason we get that is that we're almost highlighting the importance of a communication. So, I know marketeers would love to have 78% of their messages opened, but we would not encourage that behavior at all in using our system for marketing messages, because that would end up with an overall decline. But so having that granularity, very much helps support consumer duty ambitions around working with your customers in the way that they want you to work with them, and using the sort of services that they do prefer. Having access to that MI is fantastic, and being able to really see right down to the attachments of has a person downloaded an attachment. Obviously we've not got that far yet to inject something into their retinas to see if they actually read stuff, but we can see if they've downloaded it and opened it, which is as close as we can get.
I think definitely email compared to post. With post, it's just such a longer piece of feedback that you get in terms of the post comes through as a gone away. Whereas with email, you can really measure. So you get either an immediate bounce back, or the open rates, or in terms of what's going on, which is really important for the things like you said, Adam, like consumer duty, etc. Also, if a member wants to be taken off of email lists, it's really straightforward to kind of revert to a different channel if that's what they prefer. And at that point, then check, have we got your postal address up to date as well. And there's kind of other things as well that you can do in the whole communications mix as well. So if you are sending out some email comms, and you perhaps send a letter alerting your members to the fact that an email comms can be coming out if it's a really important one, so it's not perceived as being dodgy. So there's kind of ways that you can make your communication channels work together.
Oh,
sorry about that. Real life going on. So I think timely, we've talked about obviously email. I mean, email stands apart from having a mail conversation with members. But Samantha's had a follow-up question, so thanks again, Samantha. I will get to your question as well, Ross, so keep them coming. We talked about obviously better than mail, but if we're having that sort of high secure and some of the identity challenges you talked about, Adam, within an email conversation, and we talked about offsetting that against that, you could have just done it on the web. But I guess maybe I've phrased the answer in the question there inadvertently, but are there advantages of doing it as a conversation rather than say, I've done it, go to the website?
Yeah, I think it is. It goes back to the fact that if you've got the information sitting within your inbox, you can easily refer back to it. Whereas if the answer is sitting on a website, then it does mean at some point you're going to have to go back in and log back in and find it. So having a conversation, and the way email systems also concatenate your messages into a conversation, it also is quite helpful for referring back to them. So it is back to that aggregation point of information. So having that there and being able to have that conversation then to play back, and you can refer back to it in your inbox, I think does have a benefit over sticking that back onto a portal and making someone log on to read it.
Fair enough. Thinking, Lorraine, from Duncan's question earlier, a different Watson on our chat, about that trade-off between making something really secure and making something a good experience. Digital identity assurance can actually help in that, can't it? So I'm just wondering, thinking about Duncan's earlier question, but also how do we support that balance between strong security and smooth experience?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the opportunity is identity assurance and the kind of ongoing monitoring really helps schemes be really precise about where to add the friction. So not every interaction will carry the same level of risk. But then also that doesn't mean that email's only for low risk use cases at all. If the contact point you've got is trusted, and the delivery is secure, schemes can use email more confidently across the member journey, and then identity assurance and monitoring can help decide where you need to have additional steps on top of that. So say if a member is changing their payment details or accessing their account from a new device, say they're doing other things like resetting their credentials or making a request that moves money or changes the authority of that money as well. So really, I think the opportunity and the aim is to keep the routine activity simple, while using all these signals in the background, and then to kind of really pause and review the genuinely risky cases and have the step-up routines in place there. But that can be, offered up quite seamlessly to the customer as well, the member rather. and applying that in the same way. And I think the other thing around communications generally, not just within pensions, is there is an expectation now today from customers and members, is that if you're receiving an email and then you go onto a portal, it's going to have the same, it's going to know about what the email was about as well. So communications need to be coordinated, and your channels need to be working together.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think my experience of sitting in on user research for Money Helper is that people actually get reassured by the appropriate level of security. So there isn't a level that is appropriate friction that's not annoying. It's actually, you'd be scared if it wasn't there.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. It can be very quick to buy things now, isn't it? With actually a little bit of friction might be helpful.
Yeah, you mentioned this isn't necessarily for the higher risk transactions there, Lorraine, but which ties me back to Ross's question on our chat. So thanks, Ross. Focus often seems to be on the high risk scenarios, but there's risk in day-to-day interactions. How do you strike the right balance between member experience, removing barriers, and protecting members and schemes? Anything we haven't already touched upon there?
Yeah, I think probably we have touched on that. I think, and it goes back to having the right level of friction as appropriate for the thing that's happening and the communication that's happening. So how important is that communication if it's doing a more higher risk event? And probably I can think back to the work we did within the identity management working group at PASA in terms of looking at what are those high risk events, and where you need to step up the checking process as well, or the checking procedures. But then, for the day-to-day, being able to have a great customer experience, that they can get access to the information that's needed, and can receive that from the channel that they want to receive it through as well. It's like you said perfectly, it's having that appropriate level of friction, and also we see it across other industries as well. It's customers want to feel assured that there is friction for those higher risk events and things don't happen too quickly, to know, be reassured themselves that they're being protected. So that's very important.
And I think we discussed this when we were preparing. You can actually check, can't you, if your email is being used or compromised elsewhere, Lorraine?
Yes, there are organizations and systems where you can have your check to see whether your email is being, I think it's called Are We Being Pawned? And I think in our preparation I really didn't want to have to say that, but
oh, sorry about that. Yes, I think you're right. It's called Have I Been Pwned? I think it's
pwned. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Yeah,
that's okay. So yeah, carry on.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, from a customer or a member perspective, there's things that they can do to make sure their email hasn't been compromised or used elsewhere. There are other identity protection propositions and services that are out there as well that can alert you to whether your data has been used on the dark web or has been compromised at all as well. So I guess kind of awareness of that is probably very mixed across, the population. That I think in terms of for pensions and kind of organizations that are using member data to send their communications, they have a real responsibility to make sure that that data is up to date and hasn't been compromised, and delivering that service for members as well.
And I guess that plays to your point earlier, Adam, doesn't it? That not only do you have to secure the transit of the email, that's why your knowledge-based authentication checks it's the right person who actually received it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's back to layers and the appropriateness trade-off. Or crossover, should I say, not trade-off. and making sure that that you're always on and considering that, and when sending information, and also back to the data point that Lorraine was picking up on earlier. I would say, it's quite often scheme members' data includes their employer's email address, and obviously when they leave that employment, the scheme is left with an email address which is no longer valid for them. So making sure we capture personal email addresses in the onboarding process is really important. And if you know they're a leaver, also making sure you capture them at that point too. Otherwise, you can lose contact even for something that's consistent throughout their life.
Mm.
The time is flying by, so I'm going to jump ahead outside of our pensions industry for a minute. So what can we learn from elsewhere? What can pension sector learn? Because we seem to be behind the curve on trusting email as a channel. So what can we learn from elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the pension sector can learn a lot from sectors like banking, payments, and telecoms, because they've been dealing with digital fraud kind of at a massive scale for so much longer. And the main lesson I think we can learn from then is that strong security doesn't have to mean high friction for every interaction. So if you think of online onboarding of opening a new bank account or e-commerce as well, if every interaction has got a high level of friction in it, a customer will just go elsewhere. So their hand has been forced to react to it, to make sure that they are much better at spotting when something looks up unusual and only stepping up the controls when the risk justifies it. So I think that's kind of really relevant to pensions. So where the risks are kind of growing now beyond straightforward account takeover to more complex scams, and changes to, especially when there are changes to money on authority, and there's obviously new types of fraud becoming apparent. So romance scams, etc. When it's big lumps of money like this, there's a lot that can be learned from what's happening in other industries. So I think the aim is not to kind of block things that look unusual, but to use all the signals and across all of the layers to better monitor and make a judgment call to tell, if it poses a genuine risk.
Anything to add there, Adam?
Yeah, I would say certainly in my experience from a banking customer perspective, then the banks are already using different methods to give you confidence as a recipient that the message has come from them. So one of the accounts I have, they always send part of my postcode in the notification message to say, it's from us, because we will always, and that's an important part, is that consistency. We will always include part of your postcode in our messages. I have another account, and I think it might be Santander, who, as part of my onboarding, I selected an icon, a colourful icon, and again, that is then played back to me when they communicate with me digitally. So I know it's them because it's got a picture of a whatever it is, a palm tree or a sun or a crab or whatever it is I chose on day one. It's always there, so I can be confident. Now that's not completely foolproof, obviously, but it really helps. And it's a really good initial view at something. Go, well, it's Santander, it's got a palm tree on it, it's probably right. I'll go further. If it's from Santander and it's got a picture of a football, well, that's not mine. I can screen it out straight away. So yeah, I think that certainly banking are ahead from pensions in terms of their understanding of finding that appropriateness level and making sure that confidence is there.
Another question in from Samantha, which has also reminded me of something else we were going to talk about in terms of two-way communications. So Samantha's question is actually about inbound. Are there any products out there which could encrypt the incoming messages? It's just moved up my screen. Encrypt message in the same way. If not, we could easily receive data that we can't necessarily trust. So rather than ask that, well, you can answer that explicit question if you've got an answer. But I think that brings on to the other benefit of email, isn't it? In that, you're not just securing what you send out, the member
Yeah,
can use it on the way
100%.
back.
Yeah, I mean there is a requirement, an ICO requirement, which is to avoid encouraging bad habits on your customers. So yeah, sending out a message asking for some information to be sent in would appear that you wouldn't be falling foul of anything if you did that in the clear. Please send me a copy of your driving license. We see and hear about this all the time. There's clearly nothing sensitive in that message, but you're asking your customer to send you something which is very sensitive back. And if you haven't provided them with a secure way of doing that, then you would be on the hook for anything, any consequences. So yeah, certainly, obviously, email is two-way. Anyone using our system has the ability to reply for free, securely, and even get a free account as well as a recipient, so you can send your own secure messages to other people. So yeah, having that two-way is one, a really good reason to use email, but two is a key constituent part of our solution.
Thanks. I'm just looking at some of our other questions. We've already mentioned data, and I feel like I've done it on every webinar for 30 years. Did webinars even exist 30 years ago? I don't know. My email address did, but maybe not webinars. So we haven't mentioned AI yet, and surely we're contractually obliged to include that in every chat these days.
52 minutes.
So briefly, what have you seen from AI in the world of digital ID that's either helping or hindering? And how is this impacting how the fraudsters operate?
Yeah, certainly AI is helping defend fraud, and it's also obviously helping the fraudsters as well. It's clearly made fraud cheaper and faster to scale up. So things like better written phishing emails, more convincing impersonation, is very cheap now to create AI generated deepfakes, create AI generated fake ID documents really much more quickly and cheaply than before. But then on the other hand, the same technology is helping defenders spot these threats. So because AI powered checks can analyze documents, faces and behaviors in a way that can really detect manipulation and where deepfakes are, and even kind of where they are happening and being generated across the world as well. So you can almost start anticipating where they're going to be coming from as well. So AI doesn't kind of reduce the need for doing strong identity controls. It really kind of reinforces it, really, because organizations are going to need to use AI as part of their layered fraud strategy. And whether that's AI through services like document, authentication and biometric checks, and as part of the layers, so you can't really assume that any one single control is enough on its own. So it comes back to that point as well.
Indeed. Looking even further ahead, then let's look at the next scary thing coming along. Dan Brown did write a book where he wasn't panning the Catholics. He was called Digital Fortress, but everything seemed to suggest that everything could just be done by brute force attack, and therefore quantum computing would kill us all. So Adam, maybe just pick up and reassure us that these things will keep pace even when we're in a world of quantum computing, which is ever nearer.
Yeah. I mean, quantum computing is really, really interesting, and some of the capabilities will take a massive step forward. From an encryption perspective, the encryption style that we use and the strength of it, as I mentioned, is military grade. So even with quantum computing, it's expected that I'll get my numbers right here, that it would take 10 to the power 19 years to crack our encryption algorithm with quantum computing. And to give some substance to that, the universe has only existed for 1.38 times 10 to the power 10 years. So longer than the universe has existed by quite some measure. So it's effectively been classed as unbreakable from quantum computing, because no one would go to that length to try and break into an email. You know, there would be much easier ways and quicker ways if they wanted to access your email than try and break our encryption. So yeah, it's yes. What we do is quantum proof. You know,
Excellent.
things will change, obviously, but yes, it's very, very secure.
Okay.
I'm glad you took that question, Adam.
So 10 to the power 19 years. I think that's about 1.5 pension careers, I think. Let's move towards the wrap up then, as we're heading towards lunch hour. What is the one change, Lorraine, pension schemes should make in the next 12 months to reduce digital communication risk and protect member trust?
Yep, and I guess in the context of this conversation, I would suggest it would be stop thinking of the email as being unsafe and start treating it as a channel that needs to be trusted or can be trusted, and needs to be governed properly. So that means improving confidence in member email data, securing the delivery when appropriate. So, and then applying stronger identity checks and monitoring routines around the higher risk actions as well. So if that's all done well, that allows schemes to be able to move away from the over-reliance on post, and really enable them to give their members the digital experience that members can trust and that they want, in the channel that they want, and just become easier to deal with.
Adam?
Yeah, I agree with all of that stuff. I would also say, you know, there's nothing to stop you getting moving now, and also I would suggest warming your clients up to the fact you're going to do it. Don't just do it, so that they know to expect this change from you, because again, it's a change of behaviour that may raise some concerns with them. So if you can preempt that by telling them it's going to happen, then I would seriously suggest that's a good first step as well.
Thank you. So thanks for the audience for staying on board with us for the full hour. We're nearly there already. It has flown by, so thank you to my panel, Lorraine and Adam. Thank you for all your prep work and not just today's webinar. Really useful stuff there. We'll make this recording available afterwards, and if we have missed any Q&As during the session, we'll write those up for you as well. So in wrapping up, I noted a few things down while we were talking. Why is it a problem worth solving? And it leads back to it's where the members want to work. It's where they want to interact with you. They want to have a conversation with you. They want simple, straightforward answers. Doing it securely or doing it as part of an overall trusted tone of voice. We've seen, and as Adam mentioned, I wrote these down, these amazing open rates, 4 to 8% normally for any, I'll call it unsolicited email, and yet we get over nearly 80%, up towards 80% opening rates when it's a trusted part of a conversation and people know it's coming and trust they can open it and trust it's from you. We said we'd say the word trust a lot today. And the average person having 119 portals to go to, so maybe telling them go to the portal isn't as helpful as you think it is. I mentioned the FCA, expecting it to go digital by default. Not everyone on this audience will be FCA regulated, but what usually starts in the FCA tends to bleed across to the other parts of pensions, so maybe one to look out for. And the standard life evidence that email channel is what the members prefer. So maybe that makes it the problem worth solving. So my final thoughts on this is members want answers and they want convenience. And if they don't get it from you, they'll trust it from whoever does give it to them. And it might not be right, and it might not be, and it may be fraud. So on the other hand, then the regulators we mentioned want the industry to modernise. Schemes want to modernise. They want to save costs. They want to be more sustainable. There's a supply and a demand problem to be solved here, and email is the cost-effective way of doing that. But in a world governed by three-word slogans, let me give you safety by design as the real watchword to take away from this call and when you're thinking about digital first strategy. With that, I bid you a very good day. Thanks for joining us all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.